family, the Aunt Blanche and Uncle Bill and Albert and his son. So I grew up sort of with Bill and went to school with him. That's we call young Bill. And so, but Albert was a good friend of my dad's, so they go way back. We go way back. And so I don't know exactly what to tell about him. What's happening now to the blacksmith shop with the involvement of the the Minnesota Historical Society and the bureaucracy that goes with that, and the red tape and the permitting to do this or change anything or that would be exactly what the Ballys hated. They're absolutely independent people, and they would go out of their way to be independent, even if it cost them money. They didn't care. They'd turn down work or whatever if the person didn't ask right, or if they said they were in a hurry or something. We wouldn't be able to do it today. And then as soon as they'd gone out the door, they'd come and visited me for 2 hours. And they could have fixed it 6 times because they were somebody trying to push them. No, they didn't do it. And so old-fashioned independence, I guess you'd call it, and didn't have anything to do with money. They didn't care, and they wouldn't like Al. He wouldn't accept a tip if he fixed somebody'd bring in a lumberjack, somebody bring in a pickaroon and have it repointed, and he'd do the work, and it would be, $3 or something, and the guy'd give him a fin and say, well, keep the change. No, you get out the change. All I want is what's mine. I don't want any. And when the guy left, he said, you give me a tip, he'd be back next week, want a favor. So, he wouldn't sell cheap. You couldn't buy him for $2. So that's the kind of, and Bill was the same, but in a little different way, sort of a droll. Al was very witty and had a great sense of humor, and Bill had it also, but he was more droll. And, I don't know just how to describe it, but again, Dwayne Iggy told us about that. He and Bill were sitting outside the shop, and a guy drove by with a Cadillac. And he rolled down the window and said, "Can you make me a grating for my culvert so that the debris can't go in there?" And Bill said, "No, I don't know how to do that." And he went right back and kept talking to Iggy, and finally the guy had to drive away. He didn't know how to do it, make a grating, put a few rods, but no, he didn't ask the right way. So he turned it away. So anyhow, those are some things that I remember about them. The shop was sort of a meeting place for different people, truckers or loggers or others would stop sometimes after work just to pass the time of day. Or something like the people will sometimes, I don't know if they still do, but they have for quite a while, gone to Midway in the morning for coffee, or to Bucks in the morning for coffee. And the same thing, they weren't necessarily there on business, they were just there to visit. And so they'd stop at the end of the day and visit a little bit. Yeah. Usually go out of there with a smile. So those are some of the things.
Yeah. I'm curious too how things evolved throughout the years. I mean, you mentioned they would fix, lumberjack stuff and then to fixing cars. So how did that work?
Well, of course, it started out as a typical blacksmith shop. Sam Bally came from Bayfield, where he had a blacksmith shop. And he came up here with I think the Red Cliff Company, that was a logging company that logged out east of town. And he was their blacksmith. And in order to the blacksmiths in those days was kind of like the garage mechanic or something nowadays. You couldn't get along without them. You had to have something, because much of the stuff that you used was handmade, fashioned on the job, for the job, and this and that. So that's what Sam Bally started out doing. Plus, of course, shoeing horses. Lots of horses in those days. They had to shoe horses. And if you look in the shop down there on the north wall, you'll see where the studs on the wall are eaten away by horses been tied there and cribbing while they're getting shot. And and there's a tool, some kind of a device somewhere in the shop there that I didn't know what it was when I saw it, but Carrie asked me, and I said, I don't know what it is, but it has something to do with horses, because it had a clamp and some leather around the thing. And then I read in the Past Plus in the Cook County paper that Bill Bally had purchased a device for shoeing rank horses. So somehow they'd clamp this on and stretch them out and put the shoe on, and then turn it loose and put it on the other leg and do the same thing. Apparently, I never saw one used. Also used to use I can't remember what you call it. It's a frame, and then they put straps under and take the horse right up in the air, so that they are suspended, and then they can.
It's like a stock.
Pardon?
Like a stock.
Yeah.
Stock. Okay.
Anyhow, they used to do those. I never saw them used, but I know the logging companies, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and when they had a lot of horses, they had one of those that the blacksmiths would use. And so, and in the shop down there, there's also a roller for you can put a bar of iron in and crank, and it'll roll a wagon tire to put on the rim of a wagon wheel when they wear out. And I'm sure that's stuff that Sam Bally had. And then, of course, as the times changed, then they morphed into, more repairing trucks and cats and drays and logging equipment and any other, well, nowadays we'd call it just general repair, but and because they started out blacksmithing with a forge, everything was heated in a forge. They as long as Al was still active, they used the forge. They used it almost daily. If they had something came in and it was bent a little bit, they'd say, we'll warm it up a little bit, and he'd go over to the forge, and usually there was fire going, and top it with they have a rod that they poke in the fire with to knock the thing down and turn on the switch for the thing, and put the thing in there, and then he'd come to visit, and then when it got hot, they'd take it out and straighten it or whatever. Then they'd, of course, weld it up or whatever with modern electric welder or whatever, but he'd still incorporate the forge into almost every job, which was kind of neat. And of course, Al was electrical engineer. He'd been to college and that, but he typical blacksmith. And and Bill too. Bill had been to Dunwoody, and he was he was trained machinist and things, but they kind of kept with the blacksmithing and welding. That's was their, and they had modern equipment. They had a well, the lathe is down in the new building now, but they kept it up at the house in a garage, and
Did they use it up there?
very, very little,
Okay.
very little. For 40 years I did the same kind of work where I use lathe every day because it's so many repair jobs you can incorporate it into both getting stuff true and line and whatever and then weld it or whatever it takes. But they rarely used it, and he wouldn't. I said to Bill, well, why don't you bring it down to the shop? And so I'm going to bring it down here in the coal dust and get it all corroded up. And so it sat up there, still in perfect shape, but it's never got used much. So, but that's the way they were. They were, they were old world in a sense, and they were modern in a sense. But they were very good at their craft too. They were very good.
Were you there when they put up the new building?
Yes. I was in there. I remember when they poured the slab for it. Bob McClanahan poured the slab. And then I wasn't there when they erected it, or I was around, but I was doing something else. And then, of course, after they got erected, for quite a while after it had that shop, they just kind of used it for storage. They had stuff in there, caps and stuff that they were working on, but they didn't really work on them. They just sat there in pieces. And they did the work in the other building. And then eventually when Al kind of phased out of it, then they went over to the other shop and put their welders and stuff over there, and Bill worked out of that shop. But prior to that, they almost always worked in the old shop. And I can just picture the lathe. You can't tell it now because it's cleaned up in there. It never was cleaned up. It was about this deep everywhere. But they laid all the flat iron and that on the floor, the length of the building. So in order to get from the front of the building to the back, you had to go over the top of all this iron. And I can just picture Al clomping over that iron because when he was going to start the forge, he had some cedar slab pieces in the back of the shop, and there was a vise there, and he had a draw knife, and he'd make a bunch of cedar shavings and bring them up, put them in the forge, light a match to them, put a little coke over them, and turn on the switch. And first thing you know, he'd have the fire going, and that's the way that worked. And then later, Al often would do when they were working together. Al would often do the layout or of that, and Bill would do the welding. So it was, and I've seen other people do that where two people work together. One guy will cut the pieces, drill, and the other guy will do the welding and that. And then sometimes they'll trade, and the other guy will do that. But they never both working on the same exact thing at the same time. One guy's doing his thing, the other guy's doing his thing. That's sort of what they did. That's quite common. And it's also quite common that a lot of blacksmiths, I guess we'll call them, repair people, don't like to be watched when they work. They don't like it. So, and I worked with another very good blacksmith or repairman, and people would bring something and they'd say, "Oh, yeah, I haven't got time. Put it over there. I'll get to it. And of course, the minute they went out the door, he'd pick it up, but wouldn't do it when they're watching. And Bally's quite a bit like that too. And if you were in a hurry, forget it. No way they'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
They just turn you away. And I've seen them turn stuff away that they could have done, and it was part of his being honest, I guess, and realistic. But somebody brings something in, and he'd say, "No, I can't fix that. I couldn't get it straight. It would be no good." And of course, I was doing the same kind of work. And after the person left, I said, "You could have fixed that." And he said, "Yeah, I could have." But he said, in order to do it, I'd have had to make a $75 jig to hold it so it was straight and then weld it. Then I'd have to hang the jig on the wall and look at it the rest of my life. So he didn't want to do that. So he just turned the work away. But anyhow, part of their independence. So.
Did they go to, and maybe this is a little off topic, but they went to Isle Royale, right? Was that Bill and his wife that would go to Isle Royale?
I think so.
Okay. So it wasn't Albert.
Later, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they had the place on Sag on Gold Island. They had a cabin there, and for years. And I've stayed there. They invited me to go up with them and stay there. I've done it several times, and they really liked that place. It was they called it the shack, and it was sort of a shack, but it was a little cabin. And of course, then when the BWC regulations came, and they were forced out of it, and the Forest Service burnt it, I guess, and they never got over that. They really didn't like that. They always called the Forest Service the Gestapo. Here comes the Gestapo. And I mean, they got along with the local Forest Service people, but they didn't like the idea that they were forced out. And there was a lot of people like that. Yeah, especially people, independent people like that. Didn't set well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then Bill, he was the last one to own the shop, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then how long did he have it total?
Well, he kept it open part-time until I'd say, and I can't remember exactly how long ago since he died, but until a year or two before he died, he kept it open, but he didn't do a lot of work there. He still sold, welding gas, oxygen and acetylene and stuff. And he would cut or sell you a piece of iron or something, but he couldn't see to weld, and his eyesight gave out, and he couldn't see to weld, so he couldn't weld anymore. I think it was very hard on him.
Did he have people helping him then in those days that worked with him, or was he still?
Well, people would help him he could, he had a shearer, an iron worker, and he could see good enough to, but you have to see good to weld properly. You have to see very good, and he couldn't. So you can't follow. You're supposed to be welding here, and you'd be over here something. You can't do it. So people would help him though when he couldn't, I think, any longer. I think he couldn't pass the driver's test, so he couldn't drive. So some his friends they'd go down and get a load of oxygen and acetylene from the supplier in Duluth and help him get it back home so he could sell it. But other than that, I don't think anybody did any physical ironworking there. After he wasn't able anymore. So.
But he knew, and he was instrumental in getting it on the historical register. He wanted to.
You know, I remember when they did that, but I don't know the details of that. I remember when they were talking about it, and then shortly after that, they put a sign up. But I don't know the details of how they did that. Maria was asking me the other day, and I missed out on that. I don't know. And, but they were. I think because it was an old family business, young Bill, was interested in seeing that it was on the historical register. And I don't know. I don't know much about other. And then after he closed the shop and that, I think he wanted the Historical Society to get it, but of course it wasn't totally his then. Anyhow, the decision wasn't made until after he died, and then it was in 3 different hands, and how that happened, I don't know. But I think if it had been up to him, he would have just donated it to the Historical Society. But and I'm only speculating. I don't know, but I think so, because that's. But I don't think his wife wanted to do that. I think she wanted to get some money out of it. And I guess that's understandable. So, you know.
We were also, a couple months ago, we did a story on Lyle Saithry's murals, and he said that he was friends with Bill Bally as well.
Yeah. He was part of the group. Yeah, and they were good friends, and they were both. You know, I don't know this, but I'm just speculating because Lyle was a electrician and a master electrician and all, and Al was a electrical engineer. I'm sure they had things in common that they talked about and, did. Al would be consulted about electrical. I think there was something Bobby Pratt used to tell. I think it's probably on tape somewhere, but anyhow, they had some kind of a hearing because of some building burnt or something, and it was wondering if the cause was electrical, and so Al had to appear, and they questioned him, and he came in with his old felt hat and threw it down, and of course the coal dust flew out. He was respectful to the judge and all, but he told what he felt was true and this and that, and asked the judge if there was anything else. No, and put the hat back on. No, anyway, very, very colorful people. Yeah.
What's the story on the steam whistle that got mounted on the outside of the metal building? Is that something?
I don't know. They had the Ballys, of course, were collectors. They where that whistle exactly came from, who knows? I don't know if it came out of some boat that they, had something to do with, or they would buy stuff at obscure things from an auction someplace, or who knows? They had I don't know what it is now or if it still exists, but they had a brass cannon for firing a person's line, and they bought that at auction. They bid on it. The Coast Guard or somebody had an auction, and they bid on it and got it. Well, what do you do with a brass cannon for firing a bosun's line? But they had one, and they had almost everything else. I mean, the place up here on Maple Hill, just a quarter of a mile from there, they called it the ranch. Let's put it up at the ranch. And they had a 40 there. And they had stuff in there that was just like, we go in there with like a time warp. It was old stuff and every kind of, anything from old Franklin air-cooled cars to steam engines, old big one-lung gas, every kind of anything. And so I don't remember where we were going with this particular story we're telling now.
Oh, just the whistle. I thought.
Oh yeah, the whistle.
Had
Yeah, I
something
don't
to do with
know
trains
exactly
or
what
something.
happened, how they got the whistle. They were, if it was they were somehow had to do with or especially Uncle Bill, when the logging railroad ran here, and they had the roundhouse at Cascade, and somehow they were involved in some of that. They ended up with buildings and stuff, old railroad building. I don't really know the connection, but they had, whether the whistle would have been off a locomotive, but I think all those locomotives went somewhere intact, and that were in the roundhouse up here at Cascade. And but just a little sidelight there, at these get-togethers at the blacksmith shop after work, and people would be talking, and there's a common story around about the people about when the railroad was being built there, and through the swamps and that the locomotive fell off the track and went in the swamp, and they couldn't get it out, and it's still there, it's buried. And I was there once, and somebody, there's supposed to be a locomotive up there somewhere by Lima Mountain. Yeah. Yeah. He said, it was made in England. It was made out of solid brass. You added to the story. Of course, I don't. I'm sure there was never a locomotive that fell off the tracks, but that story goes around, and he added right on to, it was made in England. It was made out of solid brass.
I noticed that there were speakers in the shop down there in the metal shop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can't explain that.
Well, I didn't think that they were really musical people.
He polka.
I suppose
polka
it was
music.
Bill, young Bill. He was a great polka fan.
Yeah.
They had every polka show that was on the radio. He had to have that on. So that was probably for playing polka music. Because you come in there in the evening or whenever, and there'd always be polka music. So that would probably account for it. Yeah. I suppose he could listen to polka and music, and he probably had a speaker, so it was turned up loud enough he could hear it above the welder or what. I don't know. I don't know, and I'm just speculating.
He does that every Saturday night.
Wow.
Poker show.
There's nothing else on. What do you do? I'm not a great polka fan, but it's all right. Yeah. So,
that covered all the questions ahead of time that I had. Was there any other stories you wanted to share?
well, there's probably 100 if I could think of them.
How about when you guys went fishing, with the oryx and things
Well,
like
that doesn't have much to do with the blacksmith shop.
I
That's
know,
just a
but
fishing story.
But it's just stories that are kind of fun. That Bill Bally is in.
Well, when Bill and I were good friends, and we had another friend, and we decided that we were going to we wanted to go fishing in the spring, on the spring ice after the snow goes, and that's not a good time to be on the ice. And we didn't have a snowmobile. they existed, but we didn't have any. So we built a little, in 1 or 2 evenings, we built a little thing with 4 wheels and a little engine and a plank we sat on. And anyhow, we tried it out after just slapping this thing together. It was lightweight, so you could pick it up and carry it and put it in a boat, because in the spring, the ice pulls away from the shore and you got to take a boat to get out to the ice, and then you get on the ice and you go, and then you got to drag the boat and take it off again. So we did that. But anyhow, when we built it, we were out in front of the shop there at night. It was working fairly late, I suppose. And we got it running, and we were driving up and down the street in front of the powerhouse there and back and forth and laughing and seeing if it would work. And people were around, and they'd look, and they didn't even look up. I mean, no, here's 3 grown-up men riding on a plank on a thing. Nobody even looked. So anyhow, we took it then the next day up to the lake and put it on the boat and hauled it out to the ice and went down the lake and took it in the boat again into the next lake and so on. And we called this thing, well, it should have a name. Well, somebody suggested it. We called it the Onyx, because that'd be skidoo spelled backwards. Well, okay. So we were going down the lake with the Onyx and the boat behind, and we picked up another guy that wanted to come, so he was riding in the boat. We were going down Pine Lake, because first we went to McFarland, then on to Pine, and going down Pine Lake, and a deer came hopping, bounding across the ice, about out in the middle of the lake, and we were kind of just going to intersect him. And as we came along, the deer stopped, and he looked at us, and he looked. So we went by and looked, and Bill said, "I don't think he's ever seen an oryx before." That's typical of his wry humor. Yeah. So I don't think the deer had ever seen an oryx before, but nobody else had either. We went fishing and caught a lot of fish and came home and dismantled it, and that was the end of the oryx.
Didn't he build a lot of different contraptions? Weren't they always creating something to get somewhere?
Oh yeah, that happened quite regularly, and we used to. Well, this other friend, the one that was with us with the Onyx, and this is degenerating into this story about fishing stories. But anyhow, in this case, Al was along, but this friend had a old farm tractor, a F-14 farm, and we used to go down the lakes. This is in days before snowmobiles, and pull a sled behind, and of course you don't go very fast, but you grind along, and it beats, poor riding, but it beats good walking. So we'd grind along with this. And anyhow, this friend, Malin, was going to take Al and Bill up to Gold Island on Sag. And I suppose it was in the spring or late in the winter, anyhow. And, as often is, you get flooding, and then you get double ice and stuff. So the tractor was kind of breaking through the top ice and into the second ice, and it was probably a foot of water or something. And anyhow, Al was on the sled behind, and my friend Malin looked back, and the sled had turned over, and Al was laying on his back in one of those ruts of the ice water, And anyhow, Malin said, "I don't think he'd have gotten mad either if I wouldn't have asked him if he got wet." Yeah, I always get wet when I lay on my back. So anyhow, that has nothing to do with anything. That's just you can cut that out.
They sound like they were very interesting and
Yeah,
colorful.
very,
family,
very
yeah.
interesting. Very interesting people. And like I say, they were, you know, they would overlook all kinds of character flaws in their friends or clientele, except two things. One is that you didn't stiff them for a bill. If you did that, no use to come back. There's no way they'd do anything for you. And the other one was stealing. They wouldn't abide if somebody stole something. And like the stuff they had up at the ranch here, you know, it was subject to a certain amount of pilferage because there was nobody there. And sometimes somebody would make the mistake of bringing something in there to have it fixed. And of course, Al would recognize that. He wouldn't say anything. He just, you know, where'd you get that? Oh, we got it from so-and-so. Whatever. But boy, you were on the list. Don't try to bring anything back there because you were done. And and then he I was going to tell another story about him and somebody that apparently had owed him a bill. There was a guy in town here that had he had several businesses, but one of them was like a concentration yard. He'd buy lumber from small mills and then he'd broker it and sell it to other people. And I didn't know him. I didn't know much about him, but apparently he wasn't Simon pure when it came to honesty. But anyhow, he was cleaning up that yard, and there was a young trucker came in. He wasn't a local. He came in and he had a chain, and he said he'd like to get it fixed. And he said, you know, I won't use the guy's name, but John Doe is going to pay for it. And I said, oh, he is? Well, that's certainly funny. He never has. He said, I'll fix your chain for nothing, but I won't keep books for that. So he had no use for anybody that, you know, all he wanted was what he asked, but he wanted that. You stiff him for a bill, you're all done.
Were there other blacksmith shop? Was there a rude blacksmith shop?
There was another shop over where, it's a sort of I can't think of how to describe it because I don't know street numbers in town. Right. I just know so-and-so's place and somebody else's place. But there was one over there where, I think, I don't have to come up with names. Doesn't make a difference. But there was one just a few blocks over from there, and that was Al Root's shop.
Okay.
And he, I knew him, but he was older. He was also a logging company blacksmith. For some, that's how he came up here as a logging company blacksmith. And I remember when he was still working, but he was an older guy then. Just did smaller jobs and stuff. But he'd go there. Al Root would go there until he was old. He'd go every day. I don't know what he did. He'd come back with a sooty face. He must have done something with the forge. But.
And then that one burned down eventually?
No, it was torn down.
Oh,
it belonged to the property belonged to Ed Lind, and that would be what's your neighbor over there, the plumber? Nosker's father-in-law. And he owned the property, but he let Al Root keep the shop there as long as he was able. And then I think he finally just tore it down. Because it was just an old, typical old building.
The Ballies are pretty careful about fires, correct?
Well, yeah, they, like Al said, that they, when they got to, well, you've heard the story, I'm sure it's somewhere, that when Bill referred to it as being arrested for and convicted of shoplifting, and they were he was going to jack up the building, the blacksmith shop, and put some work on the foundation. That was the shoplifting he was lifting. And he got a stop work order because he hadn't gotten a permit. This is, 50 or more years ago, when you didn't really, there wasn't much talk about permits or anything then, but apparently there was such a thing. And the excuse was, well, that building, it's an old frame building, it's a fire hazard. And Al said, I don't know. Of all the buildings in town, this is about the only one that didn't burn.
Right.
But anyhow, that was Bill's charge of shoplifting. Now, of course, you can't even put a jack under the building and tighten up the floor or anything without getting the architectural engineers and,
Yeah.
like I say, the very thing that the Ballies would be just vehemently against, But that's the way it works, I guess, nowadays. Yeah.
So Sam Bally came here with the logging company, stayed. Did he marry someone here, or did
No,
he?
I think he was. See, he came. I don't remember when the Red Cliff Company was here, but it was in the early 1900s, and Sam died in 1922. So he would have had a family when he came here.
Okay.
And
he had the two sons?
2 sons and a daughter.
Okay, so Albert, Billy, and Bill, and who was the daughter?
Blanche.
Blanche.
I think they came in 1903.
Okay, and then Al just had the one son.
Yeah.
And then Billy, his brother, had any kids?
No, he didn't have kids.
And then Blanche had.
I don't know. I'm not, I'm not sure she even was married, but
I don't know specifics on her, but I know there's distant cousins that show up every so often, and there's Joan Rentleman over in Wisconsin.
I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's Mary Bally's family. I think it might be.
I think you're right.
I don't think Blanche was married. She used to, when she was young here, she was one of the first telephone operators in town.
Oh.
They had a switchboard here, and people, of course, wouldn't go for a number. They'd just say, give me so-and-so. Give me, local guy said, give me Bally's blacksmith shop. He said, I can't, it belongs to my dad. So she had the humor.
Yeah. So then Al married Mary?
Yes.
Okay, and they just had
one son,
who was Billy.
Yeah.
And now, when I was talking with Shar Anderson, she talked about she went in and helped Al and Mary when they were. Was he losing his eyesight, or did she? Do you remember?
I don't think she might have. I don't think he did. I mean, he might have, his.
Yeah, I think it was her.
I think it was her too. I think she kind of lost her eyesight. Yeah.
And who is she? Do you know who she was originally?
I don't. I don't know if that came from the time when Al was in Milwaukee. He went to school in Milwaukee.
Okay.
College, and maybe it was someone he met there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. She wasn't a local that I know of. Yeah.
Well, anything else that we
Any-
forgot to ask that we should?
Any other?
We should have brought with pictures of everything that we don't know what it is.
Yeah, I know the
And
horse
played-
thing, you're talking about the horseshoing thing.
Yeah.
We try to
Mhm.
describe that. We've tried to Google it to find out how it was used. We just can't figure it out.
Well, yeah, it's a rack pinion thing with some clamps that go around the horse's foot.
Yeah.
And I assume I don't know how you mounted it. I don't know if you just chained it to something but it would, I suppose you tie the horse up on one end and pull its, I assume they use it on the back feet, because that's the ones that kick.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, that's all I know about it is that it was in the Cook County paper that Bally had purchased a device for shoeing difficult horses.
It wasn't part of a stock.
No, it was a cast iron thing, and it had a crank and a rack and pin, and it would pull, and obviously it would pull this thing that held the hoof, and
It's almost like a long pole, and it's
Yeah.
almost like a jack stand.
Yeah, that's
gears
the
on
rack and
side,
pinion they call
hold
that,
the hoof at the bottom, and it's got this contraption.
Yeah.
So it must have gone horizontal, I suppose, to pull his
Yeah.
hoof back.
yeah,
Shoe, we can't figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
I'll get a picture of it and start passing it around. to people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that, and I've been down there before with Carrie and that, but
Yeah.
anything that I can help identify, I'm happy to do. But my knowledge is, I'm modern too compared to some of this stuff,
Oh yeah, we kind of had a
even
soft
if I'm 90
opening.
years old.
Yeah, we kind of had a soft opening this year, and we're going to do some more displays and signage. We don't want to do too much signage, but we want to pick out a few of these things and just label them a little bit of interpretive copy with it.
Well, I think that you're on the right track with labeling certain things and describing a little bit what it was for, because people look at it.
Right. We got to tell more of the story.
What's that?
Mhm.
Okay. And and everything in there, every piece in there had a purpose, and it was something for something.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
all the various tongues and stuff on the wall, and every one of them was meant for holding a certain kind of a
Right.
piece of shape, for doing this particular thing. The blacksmiths had to do. I have some old handmade blacksmiths stuff that they have made that, most people would look at, oh yeah, these scrap iron or whatever. But when you look at it, somebody had to do this, and they didn't have anything to do with it. They had a forge and a hammer and an anvil and some punches, and that's what they had to do with it. So I have some pieces I suppose it's for the tongue of it was on a tray when I acquired it, and I put it on a dray and used it for many years. A dray is just a little 2-runner sled that you put wood on and pull, like you would a little trailer behind a cat or horse. But they'd taken, whoever made it, had taken, I suppose, bar of iron about that long, and it was about 3 inches by probably 5/8, and they'd put it in the forge. First of all, I suppose they took a long bar of iron, put it in the forge, and heated it where they wanted to cut it, and they cut with a hot cutter. That is, it's like a chisel on a handle, and they'd put it there, and somebody built it. The blacksmiths always had a helper because it takes more hands than two to do most work. So they'd put it on the anvil, belt it, get that piece cut off. When they got that piece cut off, then if they wanted to have holes in it, then they'd heat it and punch them with a punch. Put them over a hole in the anvil and punch them and turn it over and do it again until they got the holes where they wanted them. And then this particular piece of iron, it's hammered out from rectangular flat like that to a round thing that goes through the cross member on the front of the slate, and then it's threaded on the end for a nut. That all done with a hammer. Hammer a big wide piece of flat iron, round, and then down to a certain size on the end, so that they could thread it. You know, amazing. It's an amazing piece of work what somebody did with a hammer and a forge, and that's what they did. And no drill, no nothing. You know, no torch, no shear, nothing. Forge, hammer, and a punch.
Heat it up.
And I got another piece. Somebody, if the society could figure out a way to display them, I'd donate them, I guess. But it's a ring, but maybe that wide ring, like a dog collar, steel, and it has 4 holes with eye rings on them, and the band, the round part, is forge welded. It's been heated and hammered together till it's one piece there. And then these holes, they made these eye bolts and stuck them through these holes, which I suppose were punched, and then upset them on the backside. But they still swivel on all 4 ways. I think it was for a masthead where you could put ropes down.
Oh, okay.
You know, and I'm speculating. I don't know that, but that's what, all done with a forge and a hammer. I'd like to see, you know, and not to take anything from them, but, you know, now we have people that say, I'm a blacksmith, and they give demos, and that's fine. You know, more power to them. But, you know, they take a little piece of iron and hammer out a barn door hook or a coat hanger, some little thing trinket. Okay, but here's a piece of flat iron 20 feet long. Make me one of these, you know, with the holes punched and everything done. Then and the lapped and eye bolts with the, you know, the thing hammered flat, and then when it comes around, it's hammered back to the thing, and so it's welded in one piece, so it won't pull apart. Make me one of those. if you're a blacksmith.
You made the stairwell?
I made the stairwell. That's not blacksmithing, that's just fabrication.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got some very good feelings about the blacksmith shop. I'm glad it's being preserved, and I wish it. Well, I'm glad it's being preserved.
We're glad we have people to tell us the stories. We need to hear about it.
She's about the only one.
Yeah, you better hurry, because people that know anything about her are getting
90 years
scarce.
old.
They're getting very scarce. Yeah. But
Was the metal shop building mailed here? Do you know?
Flatbed truck.
A flatbed truck?
Came from Grand Portage, I believe, Forest Service building.
Oh,
I think
that's what it's called, the
it
Forest
belonged
Service
to
building?
I think it belonged to some road contractor.
Okay.
So, when they built the road from Reservation River to border, the contractor had some steel buildings to house their equipment and stuff. It was a pretty good sized piece of construction to put that road in. And so I think when they were done, then Bally's bought one of the buildings,
Okay.
and they took it down and then re-erected it down there.
I know we've been wanting to put insulation in it for a while so it's not so cold, but Dwayne's very careful. He doesn't want to upset the spirit of Bill Bally by doing it wrong. But he keeps
Well-
getting colder and colder, so he might give in soon and let us
Yeah.
insulate it.
The easiest way, of course, would be to foam it,
Yeah.
and the most efficient. And I don't know if that's, it isn't actually, the building isn't, it would be a travesty to foam the wooden building, but the other one is sort of a modern building.
Yeah, I think Dwayne thinks Bill didn't need insulation, so we don't need
Well, and
insulation.
they did, like in the old wooden shop, I mean, they had a stove in there, but it was cold in there. It was always cold. And Al usually worked with just a felt hat and a cotton shirt. And of course, he might have had 100% full long johns, but hardly ever on wear a heavy jacket or coat.
Mhm.
They used to working in the cold. And they had a barrel stove in there. And of course, if you got cold, you go stand by the barrel stove.
Mm-hmm.
And all the time that I was around there, it was, they didn't burn wood, they burned grain oil in the
Yeah.
barrel stove. It had a tank, a bucket above with a pipe, and they regulate the valve a little bit. And it could make the barrel stove red if you wanted to. If you turn up the oil, it would get hot.
Is that
But
the oil
only in
that,
your face. I mean, your back
Yeah.
was freezing.
is that the oil that came out of the cars or
Yeah,
trucks they
sure.
were fixing?
Just all truck or car grain oil. Yeah.
So they had a kerosene motor in the corner that ran a line shaft.
Yeah.
And there's still a drill press there, but was
Yeah.
there something next to it? There seems to be something missing. And then we're hiding underneath the floor. There's a very large tub and there's a hole cut in the floor.
Yeah, and I don't quite understand
You don't know
what
either.
that
Shoot.
was there either. Because I mean, even obviously they had a one lung gas engine that ran the line shaft, that ran the drill press, and I'm sure it ran grinders and
Okay.
grinding wheels and whatever kind of power tools you needed. That's all you had.
Mhm.
And in fact, this old Al Rude's shop, when I was young, still had the old gas engine, the old one lung gas engine and the line shaft. And if he'd do something, and then if he had to do some grinding, well, he'd go crank and boop, 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 and then do the grinding and then shut her down. And so, yeah, I told Iggy that was when we still had hopes of just doing stuff that we kind of felt like doing rather than having to get permission from the Mars. And so I said, well, I'd donate a one lung engine and we can hook it up to the line shaft and make the drill press work. They used that drill press, exclusively until they finally moved into the other shop.
Mhm.
And that's an old blacksmith's drill press, I mean, it's what they call a blacksmith's drill. Doesn't have a chuck like a
Oh,
drill.
okay.
No, it just had a shank with a set screw, and the blacksmith drill was round, but it had a flat side on it, and you put the flat side to the set screw and tighten it, and that's what you drilled with it. And of course, they turned very slow because those old drill bits weren't high speed; they were just carbon steel drill bits. But they worked for for drilling mild steel like they were doing, and so yeah. It was, for me, it was a sad day when the Minnesota Historical Society got their fingers in the pie, because it's as Longfellow said, of all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest of these it might have been it might have been, it might have been different if we had the, the option to do what you wanted to do rather than what somebody said you have to do. And, like even got in trouble for replacing the windows that were falling out,
Right.
And then, like I said, when I was still on the board there, if somebody had only had the sense to take some charcoal gray paint and paint the windows before anybody noticed, but nobody ever said a word, but they didn't. All of a sudden, there's some bright wood.
Right.
So it might have been.
Do
Well,
you have any other questions?
No, I think we've covered everything we need for
More
the
than
scope
I
of
ever
the
wanted to
story.
know.
I kind of think of like when I write the story, it's like, to me, it feels like wood carving. Like I get all the information I need and then just kind of like carve out what I need from there.
Yeah.
Ends up working.
Throw the
So,
rest of the chips on the floor.
so to speak.
There's quite a pile on the floor.
I do have one other question. Do you know anything about Bill Bally's swamp buggy?
Well, actually, the swamp buggy was Lyle Sather's swamp buggy.
Oh, that's
And
So it is real.
Now, Bill probably helped him on it, but it was actually
Okay.
Lyle's.
Because there's a picture of it. I should have brought it. There's a picture of it, and it's ginormous. And he's sitting up on top, but he has his fatigues on. And we started to
Well,
question
maybe
whether
I'm
that was
thinking of a
local.
different swamp buggy.
I'll bring the photo sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe because Dwayne Aggie thought, oh yeah, he that's local here somewhere. But then when asked about it again, he didn't think that that's what he had remembered. So, but and him and Bill being dressed in fatigues, we're not sure if that was really a local thing. So we're trying to. I'm wondering where would this thing go? Is it still out there in the woods somewhere? It was huge. I mean, it looked like each wheel was maybe 8-10 feet tall.
Oh, I don't know about.
The different
I
one?
wouldn't know about that. I never saw that.
Mm.
The swamp buggy that Lyle had was just it was about like a little four-wheeler is now,
Okay.
a little, only
Little
homemade.
thing.
It was totally
Okay.
homemade,
Oh, this is something else.
Yeah,
I'll have to get you that picture. See if
yeah,
If
that'd be
anything looks
interesting.
familiar.
I can't imagine what kind of wheels it would be.
Oh, I wish I had it.
And Wayne, were you about the first to make a snowmobile in Cook County?
Well, I don't know. I made one.
Years
I don't
ago.
know. I don't know if I was first or not. I don't know of another one that anybody did.
What year was that?
Probably 62, 63,
Something
because
like that.
you finished it about the time after we got married.
Yeah.
I drove it.
Yeah, we got pictures of her driving it. It worked, except it was heavy.
Didn't want to get stuck.
They say that, the difference between blacksmiths and engineers is that the engineer can calculate how strong something has to be and make it as light as possible. And the blacksmith, he makes it heavy enough that this isn't going to break. So things tend to get heavy, but they don't break.
Mm-hmm.
I must have been made by a blacksmith.
Yeah. I can relate to the heavy part.
all right.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It'll be fun to see